Hello everyone. It's 4 o'clock, ready to go with this webinar. First of all, welcome. My name is Tora, and I manage our freelance community here at Outvise. Some of you, you might know me, some of you might be new. This is great. Our webinar topic for today is Mapping AI Adoption in Knowledge Workers, Must-Know Findings. I think a lot of you probably participated in the recent study about how knowledge workers are using AI tools in their work. If you didn't, no worries, this webinar will still be very relevant for you. Today, our guest speaker and co-founder of the study, Eryn Peters, will share all about the key findings and all about the study in general and answer any questions that you may have. So I guess she'll run through the agenda a bit to tell you what's going to happen in the next 30-45 minutes. And if you have any questions throughout, just send them through the chats and we'll get to them towards the end. So before we begin, as always, I just want to do a quick second to introduce Outvise. Maybe if there's some people who are new here. Outvise is a freelance talent marketplace focusing on business tech roles. We currently have over 40,000 freelancers on our platform, and we operate globally. However, our main markets are Spain, Germany, the UK, and just all around the Middle East. So if you're a freelancer looking for your next project, if you're looking to hire freelancers, just check out outvise.com. Now I'd like to properly introduce today's guest speaker, Eryn Peters. Eryn has been a longtime supporter of the Outvise community, actually. She's the founder of Startup Consortium and the writer of Weekly Workforce. As a thought leader in the future of workspace, she focuses on AI's influence on jobs and skills, remote working, the freelance economy, and worker engagement. Her contributions to the talent economy have helped over 4.5 million workers in more than 190 countries access upskilling and job opportunities. So Eryn, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you here and to see your presentation. I'm just going to hand it over to you now.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me. As Tor mentioned, I've been a big fan of the Outvise community for a long time. So I'm actually so pleased that I get to get a little taste of what it's like to be a part of it by joining today. So thank you so much for having me. Awesome. Well, as Tor mentioned, we're going to be talking a lot about AI and adoption today. Not only, what is the current impact of AI on the future of work? As Tor mentioned, I read about this and write about it constantly in my newsletter, but also how this whole project even kicked off, how we went about it, because I know a lot of you are doing your own research projects or exploring AI on your own. And so understanding the methodology might be interesting to you. And then, of course, the pièce de résistance that everybody is here for is really understanding how other people are using it and then getting those insights and teasers into what's happening in kind of the world of work and AI. So to kick things off, I just want to get a feel for who's in the room right now and what our levels of adoption are. So there's a poll that should be popping up on your screen. And I would love to know how you are currently using AI. So I'll pause here for a few moments. And I'm guessing Tora will be able to show those pretty much right away in a minute or two, right? Perfect. Oh, amazing. So we've got people who have dabbled quite a bit, which is really great. So you're going to get a ton of new ideas of how you can use this, but I just want to say congratulations, because the majority of you have tried it at least once. And I think trying new things is one of the hardest parts when it comes to new technology. And so let's talk a little bit about all of this together. But first things first, Tor did an amazing introduction, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself. But one of the biggest things that I want to highlight is I have helped so many workers around the world to acquire new skills and gain access to jobs. And so I've been a community manager of communities just like this and helped build unicorns in this space. And so I know a thing or two about helping people to achieve that next level in their careers. So let's take today and look at it with that lens of how can we help you progress a little bit further and use these as tools in your toolkit to advance your career and maybe earn a little bit of extra cash. So what is the current state of affairs with AI and the future of work as a whole? Well, people are a little bit concerned and worried. And so studies actually show that 47% of workers are concerned that the progressions in AI are going to make them lose their jobs, which is a lot. So basically half of us right now are going, in 5 years' time, I should probably be changing gears in my career. And the reality is that not all of us need to be worried the same amount. So World Economic Forum actually splits skills and tasks into three different categories. The first category is a high potential for automation. And I think this is really where most people are going, like, AI and robots are going to steal my job. They're going, we're not going to have humans at all anymore. And in reality, most things that we're talking about with AI, especially generative AI, fall into this second bucket, which is the high potential for augmentation, which means it's still a human, it's still a worker that's doing these tasks and having these skills, but it's augmented by AI and technology. So think productivity gains rather than entire replacement of humans and staff. And then, of course, not everything is going to be affected as much by technology. And you're probably going to have some more future-proof skills in some of these areas that are just simply never going to have, AI take over or replicate some of these things. And so not all of us need to be worried. But one thing we do need to be mindful of is that the prioritization of skills in and around AI is going to be quite high on your list, because a whopping 66% of leaders will not hire someone unless they have at least some AI skills. So you should really learn how to start dabbling a little bit into that augmentation category if you haven't already. And this is where it gets tricky, because all of us are feeling like we should do this. And some of you have probably started going, oh, I really should actually pick this up. But then you look at a market map like this and all the tools and skills out there and you go, where do I start? And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we have with AI and the future of work, is that there's more tools than ever before. ChatGPT really is just the tip of the iceberg. And a lot of us don't really know all of the ways that we could use it. So we kind of need this inspiration almost of ways that we might implement it in order to go, oh, okay, I might learn the skills of how to do that on a more regular basis. So it's just confusing where we could even start to develop these things. And truthfully, this is kind of the birthplace of this research project. Was, what if we could measure AIQ in a way that will allow people to self-reflect on their own AI usage and look at it in a more measurable way when it comes to adoption. So we shouldn't look at someone who's creating their own AI from scratch versus someone who's using ChatGPT in the same way. And not everyone who's using ChatGPT are using it in the same breadth either. One person is using it instead of Google, and the other is writing very complex prompts. So how can we really look at this in a multifaceted way? And this is really where the dream team came through. So my friend Evo, if you haven't heard of him, he's the founder of Saudi AI Leadership Forum, and also a company called the Remote How, which was helping companies work more remotely. And he and I were chit-chatting back in May or so, and we're both big tool nerds and geeks. And so we're going, let's try and understand how everyone is using these different types of tools and how we can get everyone to gain more skills in an area that's just growing, as I mentioned. And we thought, let's kick off a research project. And then we thought we should probably call an adult. And so we called my friend John, who is not only an incredible author of a book called Open Talent, where he writes about freelancing, contingent workforce, crowdsourcing. It's a great book if you haven't read it already. But he's also a member of the Laboratory for Innovation Sciences at Harvard. So he was able to introduce us to some fabulous researchers that could validate all of our different work that we were going through, anything from methodology all the way to our findings. And so through this exercise, we started going, what exactly are we trying to answer? Because we don't just want to get a list of tools. That's not super helpful for anyone. We really wanted to understand, what is adoption? Like, what does that actual curve look like? And what are the indicators that would make someone further down the adoption curve than someone else? We want to see where and how it's being used. So that augmentation or automation, are people using it to make decisions, just for brainstorming and creativity? We wanted to hear a little bit more about demographics. Are men or women adopting it more? Is Spain adopting it more than Canada, for example? And what about contractors and employees? How does the working relationship or construct really affect how people are leveraging technology right now as well? Psychological impact. This is a big one, because we saw how concerned all of us are about our jobs and the future of work. And I think all of us have probably had both a positive and negative experience with technology and AI. So it's not one or the other. How do we look at this holistically when it comes to ethics or sentiment? And then if we're mapping the adoption curve, can we predict the future? So can we find indicators in how someone is using AI today and then try to kind of guess how they might be using it tomorrow or in 6 months from now? So then with all of these questions, we go, where do we even start and how are we going to collect this? And traditionally, if you're going to run research, there's two ways that you go about it. The first is the usage of interviews, and the second is the usage of surveys. And so the great thing with interviews is that you can really get depth of information. You can talk to someone and double down on something that they mentioned or get them to clarify in different ways. It's better for storytelling and rapport. But the great thing with surveys is that it's structured data. So analyzing on the back end and then gathering some of these trends is a heck of a lot easier to do. And it's also a lot more scalable. So there's not a ton of us to do these usage interviews, but we also didn't just want super structured information and not have the discovery that an interview might have. So we're going, I want my cake and to eat it too. So what are we going to do? I thought, let's fight fire with fire. And Evo is a technical savant and had started building a tool to do this already. And so we kind of adapted some technology and said, let's create a chat conversational AI bot. And let's just have these in-depth interviews with everyone at scale. So anyone can log on and have a conversation with our chatbot. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And we're asking pretty much everything under the sun, clarifying, and you name it. One of the cool things that I really love about it is traditional interviews also have a lot of bias. And so interviewer bias can kind of reflect into the interviewee sometimes. And with a chatbot, that's totally eliminated. But what you can maintain is the ability to build rapport. So our chatbot, if you're like, hey, dude, it's like, hey, bro, and it will actually mirror your kind of tone and style, which is makes for a much better user experience, I think. And so from here, we were going, we don't just want someone to talk to a chatbot and then get zero value out of this and just turn into a white paper that sits in a book in a library forever and never gets touched or read. So we're actually developing a fully customized, personalized report, which is kind of the purpose of this. Remember, we want people to see how they're personally doing with their skills and adoption and think of all of the ways that they're able to improve and enhance. So each person who gets interviewed is going to receive their AI Maturity Index score. So what is kind of an all-encompassing score that looks at frequency, reliance, sentiment, you name it. We're going to give you benchmarks. So, I'm a marketer by trade. How do I compare to other marketers? Are they using it more or less than I am? How about other people who are in my country, for example? How can I get inspiration from other people like me or at my skill level or one level above by looking at use cases of how they're leveraging it? And then not only can I get that inspiration, but how do I actually do it? So we wanted to provide resources and step-by-step guides where someone can actually bring these things to life within their day-to-day work. So all of this is coming. If you did do the interview already, it's going to be on its way, but you can't do benchmarks until you have enough people. So you'll probably get it in the next week or two. But now you're going, all of that's great. Don't tell me how you did it. Just tell me what came out of it. And I respect that. So let's talk a little bit about how it went. We had tons and tons of great responses. So we had 1,255 total respondents that came through. There was over 30,000 messages sent, almost 15,000 interview minutes. And we actually are able to collect 85 data points per conversation, which is a lot. So we have tons of great data really coming from all over the world. So we get a really interesting lens and mix of how different people are reacting and what some of those cultural impacts might be, which we'll talk about a little bit later and in the white paper too. But let's look at some of those data points of what we're able to track. Things like roles. So obviously, if you're a marketer, you want to see how marketers are doing, but if you're an executive, you want to see how other executives are using this, or tech and IT might be very different use cases than someone who's in finance and accounting, right? So we thought the nuance of roles and job description is important. In terms of employment, full-time employees or contractors, how does that really work? What about gender, income? Is income related to frequency of use? It is, we're going to talk about it. Age and remote work as well. And you know what? We actually had 477 different tools that were mentioned as well, which is kind of crazy. I see a question that came through, and did you analyze with AI? Yes, we did leverage AI in some of the analysis here in a number of different ways, and I can definitely touch base on that more afterwards as well, if you wanted to ask about that. Happy to dig in and nerd out on it. But let's talk about the actual usage and insights. So 62% of all of our respondents are using AI daily. So this is a minimum of once per day. 30% of people say that their work-life balance has improved thanks to AI. The average time saved by someone who's using AI is 16 hours a week. It's like 2 whole working days, which is crazy, crazy, crazy. And the average tools per user, so average that one person is using, is 3.14. So shout out to Pi, because it matches there. But people are typically diversifying the ways that they're using it with different tools. In terms of frequency of use, we wanted to know, like, who are our heaviest users? Well, it turns out that really big and really small companies are using it the most, mid-size not as much. Remote workers are using it way, way, way more than on-site workers and those that are in an office. And the industry, to me, this wasn't as surprising to have IT services, management consulting, marketing and advertising, and financial services come out on top, just because traditionally they've adopted other technology at a much more rapid rate. And then those that are sometimes a little bit slower moving, like education, healthcare, and oil and energy, were adopting it a lot less. So to me, it wasn't as surprising, but there are some interesting cross sections that you'll read about in the white paper. And you're going, we're freelancers, we don't really care. Like, why should I care about frequency of use? Well, freelancers who use AI more earn way more money. So daily users of AI, this is freelancers specifically, by the way, daily users earn 17% more than someone who's only using AI weekly. So if all of you want a 17% increase and you're only using it once a week, let's pump up those numbers. The higher you get, the more you're going to earn, according to our research. And so you're going, what are ways that I can maybe increase those numbers? Well, the top ways that people are using it to increase their productivity, things like research, sales, and sales support and messaging and everything like that, human resources, creativity, whether it's brainstorming or developing images, a lot of that fell into similar categories. And then, of course, technology, Copilot, and things of that nature. But let's talk a little bit more about psychological impact, because technology and productivity is great, but there's a lot of reasons outside of productivity that someone might be using or not using AI. So what are some of the top reasons that people are using, or that it's increasing your psychological well-being or enhancing it, making it more positive? The increased productivity actually leads to more of a work-life balance. So these are really closely related together. It's really improving decision-making. A lot of people were expressing in kind of their anecdotal and quote feedback that having someone you could bounce ideas off of and talk through this brainstorming and decision-making that wasn't your boss or wasn't someone who was going to judge you was just a real boon to having their productivity and just overall psychological well-being. And then reducing the cognitive load. So am I able to offload some of my smaller tasks or work and then leave myself more open to creative thinking or more open to problem solving rather than doing kind of menial and mundane tasks? Then this was also a really big factor in psychological well-being. What was interesting is 30% of frequent AI users reported an improved work-life balance. And so frequent being daily, but if we actually drop that down to weekly, then only 18% report the same thing. So the more you use it, the more positive psychological well-being associations that you had with it. But not everything is positive, as I mentioned. It's really, really hard to accept change. And not everyone wants to adopt new technology for a number of reasons. So what are some of these negative impacts and barriers to adoption? Some are concerns about authenticity, feeling overwhelmed, frustration with the limitations when it comes to how things are able to be produced or used. And I think also this anxiety about capabilities and job security go hand in hand as well. So some of it is my job going to be replaced if I adopt this technology? Then I'm probably not going to adopt it. So obviously that's how a lot of people will feel, is if you go, hey, if my company wants to adopt this so they can reduce headcount, I'm that headcount. And so people don't want to necessarily do it. But I think it really leads to these barriers that link so closely, is lack of knowledge in how it works or how you'll use it, not trusting the accuracy or the results that would come out of it. So feeling like you have to fact check something all anyways, why would you even use it? The complexity of tools and how they integrate together. So gray work is huge. Gray work is when you have to implement a lot of different tools in a lot of different places. So it creates more work sometimes than productivity gains. And then of course, just resistance to change in general, like leaving the status quo, or certain roles are saying, I earned my stripes by doing articling in law, and you should have to too. You shouldn't have to skip this. So there's other kind of cultural impacts, even on a role basis, that impact this as well. So all that to say, the feelings are really, really mixed. And not everyone's feeling the same about AI. Some are very positive, some are very negative. Those that are feeling a little bit more positive about it, USA, UK, European countries. Those that are feeling a little more negative about it, India and the Middle East. Obviously, we can look at things like tech exports and make some assumptions here, but we're going to share a bit more data and double click on this in the white paper too, of why we suspect that is with some of the other data correlations. Those that are using it more are loving it more. Goes hand in hand to a certain extent, except for when we come to company size. So if you remember, our really small companies and really big companies were using it the most. Well, our small companies are saying, yeah, we love it and we're using it a lot, but enterprise companies are saying we're using it a lot and we actually hate it. So we should kind of explore why that is when we're talking to enterprise companies. What's not working with their implementation? Why aren't people loving it when they're using it? Freelancers and contractors, we love it. I'm here with you because I'm also a freelancer. And those that are fully remote are loving it more than on-site. And this one's also interesting. There's a stat that came out from LinkedIn and Microsoft, and 75% of workers are saying that they're using AI in the workplace, but 78% are saying that they're bringing their own AI. And so what that might mean in some of these things is that if AI is not encouraged to be used by your workplace, those that are working at home and not under the supervision of a company may be using it more freely if they don't think they'll be penalized for using it. So we're investigating some of these additional findings as well. But all that to say, there's a ton of things that affect adoption. You can see all of these different areas, whether it's cultural, work constructs, you name it. So we've actually identified 9 specific scales of adoption that we're actively able to measure against and give people almost scores within these areas. So depending on where you land on some of these scales, so for example, things like customization, are you using off the shelf, going straight to ChatGPT, or are you creating your own solution? That's actually going to directly impact where you're falling on the adoption scale. Same with the psychological impact or trust factors. So all of these are different ways that we're looking at it. What's interesting with looking at the factors of adoption and the adoption scale is that we can actually predict what people will be doing next by indicating or seeing where other people before them have fallen on that scale. So we can map people onto this adoption curve, and then it means that we can predict the future. So we ask top knowledge workers how they're continuing to explore. And the number one way that they're going to continue to leverage and explore AI is within business intelligence, anything from automated reporting, visualizing data, helping them make decisions in more data-driven ways. The next is all about efficiency and process efficiency and automation. So how can I start taking small things and moving from augmentation into that automation category? And then, of course, being customer obsessed. So how can I leverage technology to make a better end user experience or better customer experience, whether it's through sales, customer support, you name it, anything customer facing, how can I make that more enhanced? So now you're going, okay, this is all great insights on a macro level. Tell me the real stuff, like what tools are people using and how can I, start using them myself? So here are some of the top 10 tools that we had listed. Obviously, ChatGPT is the first one that's on there. I think it's become the most prolific in the world of work and just in the media in general. Over 65% of our participants mentioned ChatGPT specifically by name. But there's an interesting mix in the number of tools and the types of tools that were listed overall. Remember, there was 477 that we had mentioned, and that number is growing as more people are interacting with it. But some are standalone, something like ChatGPT or clouds where you just go straight and you can log in and interact with them directly. But a lot of these are integrated into tools that we've used for a while, like Notion or Canva. These didn't always have AI components to them, but they're starting to be integrated directly into the tools. And the rate of adoption with some of these is different if I have to go to a new place or if AI is appearing where I'm already doing my work. So it's interesting to see the relationship between where someone has to seek out a new tool versus how an existing tool that they're using is changing alongside them. And what's great is with all of these tools come that productivity gain. So it's 16, but actually closer to 17 hours per week that are being saved. And the top use cases of productivity, so where people are seeing the most productivity gains and time saved, research assistance, content creation, summarizing documents, also summarizing calls was a big one that we saw. Things like writing emails and communications with other people, brainstorming partners, as we mentioned, with that psychological safety that comes with brainstorming, data analysis, task automation, code generation, things like Copilot, presentation creation. Personally, I haven't found a great one for this yet. So if you have tips, let me know. And proofreading. So especially in a large global community like this too, multiple languages, proofreading was such a big one for global and remote teams. So that's all I've got to share with you today in terms of insights into all of our research. But what's next is if you didn't get a chance to talk with our user research interviewer, you still have a chance to. So if you have your phones handy, feel free to go ahead and scan this QR code. And this is going to bring you directly to that chatbot interface where you're going to be able to tell us everything about how you're using it. And remember, the more detail you can give, the more valuable insights we can give you back. So just keep that in mind. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the average person to go through this. But again, just try and give as much as you possibly can because those personalized reports are coming out very soon. And so you'll still be able to make it into that first round of people who are getting them. So I'll continue to pause here for 5 more seconds. But of course, those who are going, I've already done it, or I just want to hear more about the kind of overall results, just stay tuned. You can also go to our website, ai-maturity-index.com, and then put your email down to be notified about when the white paper comes out. We're going to go through all of this information in the white paper in more detail and double click in different areas that we found are interesting based on the data. So stay tuned. But also you can stay in touch. So if you want to connect with me and ask me a few questions after this is my LinkedIn. Feel free to scan it and add me there. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter where I just nerd out on this stuff on a regular basis, you can also find it in there too. But I do think that we have a good bit of time for Q&A as well. And I see some questions in the chat too that I can also start getting to, but I'll pause in case Tora, you've got any other plans, or if you want to facilitate in any way, just let me know what typically works best.
I don't know. The questions are yours. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Oh, Evo's here, my business partner. So if anyone, he's got the chat link there if you missed the chance to be able to scan it. Awesome. All right, I'm going to go through some of the questions in the chat. So if you have more questions or comments, feel free to add them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, whatever works best for you. But I'll just start going through some of them here. So did you analyze with AI? Yes, we did, in a number of ways. So, I mean, all of us know things like Copilot. We're using that to help with code and doing all of our different kind of data schemas and mapping on the back end. We also did some preliminary analysis using large language models for basic insights and testing. Obviously, when you're creating an interview or a survey like this, you have to go through and iterate a number of times. Otherwise, we just straight up would have like launched something, you gather data, then now you're missing stuff if you change your questions. So we did use it to ideate, we did use it to brainstorm, we did use it to really help us at every stage of this project. So drinking our own Kool-Aid a little bit of how can we, augment all of our own work here. Of the 477 different tools, how many rely on major models like OpenAI, BERT, and the likes? It's a great question. We haven't done this type of an analysis just yet, but not all of them are specific to LLMs. A lot of people are making their own custom technology too. So this one, I don't have an answer for you just yet, but we'll maybe double click and do some research on our own. So Eva, we can look at this one if you think it's interesting. Causality. Yeah, I think this is important too. So are AI using consultants more successful and better paid, or are successful consultants more open towards the use of AI? Well, and I think this is a great question, right? Is it correlation or is it causation? Because Also, if we look at the fact that certain countries are using AI more than others, or do some have more access to technology? And does that mean that they're more willing to adopt, or they just have straight up have access to it? So the nice thing with the interviews is that we actually have the full conversations and stories where we can open up and read into this to understand how people are using it in different ways. And it's not just saying, I am using it and, I am more successful. We can see if the kind of impact of the way that they're implementing it is really going to be affecting direct things like income. Because someone who is seeing productivity gains as an in-house employee paid on a salary basis versus someone who's seeing productivity gains as a freelancer working on a project basis, that has a really different financial impact. If you're a contractor and you're getting paid on a project basis for outcomes and deliveries, but you can do it in half the time, that allows you almost to double your income by opening up that much more time in your calendar. So I think there are a lot of nuances to it, as you mentioned, and that's what we're going to continue to investigate. Yes, financial services, we are going to be breaking down more industries and role types in the full white paper. So I don't have any specific breakdowns ready to share with you today, but we will definitely be doing that in the white paper. Yeah, will you do the survey again in 6 months and a year? This is a great question. So we've actually made the decision to keep this tool open and free for independents and individuals who want to take it forever. So that's one of the reasons why it's taking us a little bit longer to process those individual reports, is because we're trying to make them automated. So if anyone wants to take this every quarter or every 6 months or every year to see how they're progressing or see how their benchmarks might change, then that's really what we wanted to accomplish. It's really, really, really hard to stay on top of all this new technology, and it's constantly going to change and grow. And so that's why we were saying we don't just want to do a snapshot of this now and have it be out of date in a month or two. We want it to be ongoing. So that's what we're working on, is to make this free and open for independence. And then we can also do custom reports, like for a company who wants to evaluate their team and see how they're growing and evolving with technology over time. Awesome. Continuing. Yeah, so great shout about the World Economic Forum, Amir. So with that, they also have a huge initiative called the Reskilling Revolution that they're doing, where they're, I think it was trying to reskill, I can't remember the exact number, so I don't want to quote it, but there's a really significant portion of people that they're trying to help fund and gain access to new skills for those that are going to be affected the most by job automation, and those who are going to kind of miss out on some of this area. They're actually ahead of their 10-year plan of providing skills for people in these areas to further develop. So if you look up World Economic Forum Reskilling Revolution, they have a whole page dedicated to how they're going about that in different ways and how they're going to try and future-proof different people's skills in that way. So my thoughts on it, I think all of us really do need to stay on top of skills constantly. And especially for freelancers, they're 5 times more likely to be learning a new skill than someone who's an employee, which is a stat that was from Upwork recently, who did about the rate of learning for new skills for people. And so I think all of us on this call are probably more apt to be constantly upskilling and reskilling, but for a lot of people, they're just not as conscious of these things as other ones are. So we all can't get too comfortable ever, I think, in our skills, but especially those that are knowledge workers, you're going to have to continue to learn and grow. How can AI automate tasks? And you explain the process for this. It's a great question. There's a lot of different ways you can automate tasks with AI. One thing that I will say is you can definitely take the interview, not to shamelessly plug it again, but we're going to be giving some recommendations with how-to guides that will be more specific to your use case, because there's hundreds and thousands of ways that you can automate with AI, whether it's within a specific tool or creating your own customized AI agents to do small tasks or even big tasks. And so it would be really hard for me to try and explain in this environment for something that's relevant for you. But one way I can do that is by leveraging our technology. We'll make it relevant for you. So be sure that you take that, because we'll probably have some good recommendations that will be more specific to your everyday life. What challenges do consultants face when integrating AI in their work? I think this is a great question. I don't think all consultants are affected equally. I think one interesting one that hasn't been talked about a lot is a lot of people still culturally see using AI as cheating. And I think a lot of times when you're providing work for someone, they might go, okay, well, I want none of this writing to be created by AI. And what if you're a writer, you're writing copy, or you're a marketer? Is that something that now you'll have to grapple with, right? Does my client want this to be touched in any way by technology? Am I limited by someone else's preference of me having to use technology? So I think there's a whole bunch of different types of ways that consultants might have challenges in integrating AI in their work, from accessibility to pricing and tools. Some tools with AI are just very expensive for an independent consultant, to your end customer and what they want, and also the skill of role and job type that you're doing. Oh, great question. Matri, how can we keep ourselves updated with new developments and use cases for AI for consulting? This is a really, really excellent question. So we had close to 30% of our respondents were consultants in some way, shape, or form. And a big question that they had was like this, and also, how can I use the tool for my clients? So we are actually going to be starting a newsletter that's dynamic insights to what's happening in the world of AI. What is the lens for consultants specifically, who not only will be implementing AI and technology into their own workflow, but might be implementing AI and technology into their customers and workflow, or the outputs that they're delivering. And so we are going to be launching this within the next 4 to 6 weeks. But in the next few days, you'll be able to actually pre-register for this newsletter as well. It'll be weekly insights on how AI is affecting consulting world more specifically. And it will be ongoing kind of drip of things that are happening currently, and then how you're evolving in your journey too. So that's the great thing, is that we can tie these worlds together. The 66% figure, I believe that was a Microsoft study. I can try and find, I have the link for it here in the notes for that, so I can share that with Tora after it, that we can share out. Office-based AI users are low, which discussions employers are bracketing these tools today. Yeah, so this is an interesting question. So when it comes to office-based AI users, we can also think a little bit about enterprise-based AI users, and this comes back to that bring your own AI chat that I was talking about. So 75% of people are using AI at work, yes, but 78% are bringing it themselves, which means that even if they are being blocked, let's say you work for this big multinational and you have a company device and they have ChatGPT blocked, you can't access it, all of these other things blocked. This means that a lot of people are going, I'm just going to put information in here and use my own tools, or I'm going to go to a different way of accessing these tools to use them. So it's hard to understand what people are actually using technology for, where people are putting company data, which is another scary thing, and also just measuring how work is getting done these days, which is one of the things that we wanted to tackle here. Is a lot of companies do have policies now on how AI can be used, which tools they have, and how it's going to be implemented. Some of them are starting to set up their own environments. So for example, there's ways that a large company could set up ChatGPT where they still access all the information, but anything that their company puts into the system doesn't actually go to train the public models. That has a lot of different implications. On the one hand, your data is secure, but also these LLMs require data to get better and help everyone. So if everyone just stops sending data, then where does the maturity of the LLM go? It's like a whole debate. Let's see. Loving the conversation and thoughts in here too, guys. Return to office mandates in IT jobs in Europe. Yeah, there's tons of people returning to the office as well. Do I think that AI has an impact in returning to the past? I'm not sure if I totally follow this question here. As in, are you kind of relating the regression of office workers, like of going remote and then going back to the office, or are people going to adopt this and then revert? If that's the case, maybe I'll answer that, but you can clarify if I'm not answering the right thing. I do think that there's always going to be a bit of a pendulum in adoption with anything. And some people are going to be resistant and not want to try a lot of things to begin with. Some people are going to be running to try a lot of things and go, it didn't work for us, we're not going to try it again. And I also think that there's hypes and bubbles where everyone goes, oh, this is the greatest thing. It's going to save the way that we're working. It's going to change the way that we're working. And if it doesn't hold true to your like the promises that the technology made, then you're just going to start dropping it, right? So I do think that there's going to be ebbs and flows in adoption with this too, where there's a lot of people that's still in the exploratory phase of AI and not as many people in the implementation stage. And I think it's over 80% of AI implementation projects right now are still failing. And a lot of it has to go with this adoption mentality too of, is it actually solving the problems that we want to solve? Is it actually, technically viable for us to be able to do this? And also, I think there's a difference between change management and project management. This is a technical implementation, but at the same time, the project isn't over when you close the Jira ticket. The project is over when it's business as usual. So you might set up the tool, but if nobody's using it how it should be used, then that's still a failed implementation project. So I think we're starting to go, okay, what is change management and how do we make organizational change that lasts within teams? It's a big, hairy problem that nobody's fully solved just yet and is constantly changing. Aha. If it will impact an automation process for avoiding return back to the offices. I don't know if I necessarily have any stats or opinions on this. Not too sure. I mean, if people are also automating more processes, maybe less people are returning to the office because they have less people overall. But I do think that there's a whole discussion around kind of like employee surveillance right now as well. A lot of people who are not in offices, then companies are like, how do I know you're working? And some people are doing things called like overemployed. So they're working remotely, but they're working multiple full-time jobs. And a big part of that is automating their work. So do I think that automation and remote working are directly tied to one another? Not necessarily. But do I think that there are instances where, automation is happening and then people are kind of automating things behind closed doors? Potentially, yeah. Return to the office will burn more jobs than AI will burn. Yeah, I think so. I think more and more employees are less willing to go back to the office for sure. We see that with Amazon right now, right? Cool. All right. I think I scrolled all the way through all of the questions. So unless anyone else has any last burning thoughts, or again, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message, I'm happy to direct you to any specific stats and things that I've mentioned in today's call.
Yeah, I think those are all the question. Eryn, I don't know if you have any last slide or something, or if I will. Okay, this is the this is the last slide. So yeah, I mean, thank you, Eryn, so much. This was extremely interesting, honestly, extremely interesting. And I was wondering, this report that you presented here, this specific with the not the individual report that will come later, but I mean this one, is it available or?
Yeah, so we'll have the full white paper coming out.
Yeah,
I'm gonna think about whether or not I'm gonna share the whole presentation, just because we do have more people who are coming in. So these numbers might slightly change from the white paper, obviously, if we have
okay,
more people coming through.
yeah.
So I do want to, we'll probably send you guys we can notify you all when the full white paper is out, and then you can get that more detailed information.
Amazing, amazing. And yeah, thank you everybody so much for attending. And I mean, like as Eryn said, the engagement, the conversation, the questions, I love this. This is what Outvise webinars are all about. So thank you so much. And as soon as I close this webinar, there'll be a little survey if you would fill that out just to give us some feedback. That would be amazing. But yeah, thanks, Eryn. Thanks, everyone. So it was great.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.